In the fall of 2023, disgraced former police officer Natalie Mam from England was jailed for over 3 years after it was found that she'd used her position of power to tip off a criminal contact about a classified investigation. Mottram had started her law enforcement career with Cheshire Police before becoming an intelligence analyst with the Northwest Regional Organised Crime Unit, or ROCU. At the time of her employment in that capacity, the National Crime Agency had launched Operation Venetic, which focused on the encrypted communications platform EncroChat, used by criminals across Europe to communicate on their illegal activities and avoid detection. Mottram, whose role was to conduct threat assessment of criminal organizations, had been briefed on the covert operation. In recent years, she'd bonded with Leah Bennett and her partner Jonathan Kay over their shared love of the gym. Mottram alerted Kay, a suspected criminal, that the authorities were investigating Encro. On April the 24th of 2020, a friend of Kay's, who wasn't named for legal reasons, revealed that the police were capable of accessing Encro software. That information was disseminated among Encro users with one message indicating that it came from a lady who works for the police. The leak was detected and Mottram's superiors became suspicious that she was responsible for it and placed her under surveillance. On June the 12th of 2020, she was asked to analyze an intelligence log pertaining to Kay, but the task was actually a setup by the authorities. When Mottram left work, she went directly to Kay and Bennett's house in Great Sankey, Warrington, where she corruptly informed them about the intelligence log. Bennett then contacted the same friend of Kay's who'd initially spread the information about Encro, asking to meet in a supermarket parking lot. Mottram, Kay, Bennett, and the person in question were arrested later in the day by the National Crime Agency, and over $250,000 in cash were recovered from Kay and Bennett's house. It would emerge that Mottram had her own key to the couple's home, and computer logs indicated that she'd worked on Operation Venetic from the address. As the legal proceedings into the matter unfolded, Kay pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice and was jailed for 2 years and 6 months. Prior to her sentencing at Liverpool Crown Court, Mottram admitted misconduct in public office, perverting the course of justice, and unauthorized access to computer material. Rosemary Ainsley, head of the Crown Prosecution Service Special Crime Division, noted that the corrupt officer's actions were a gross breach of trust and had the potential to be hugely damaging to a very important and large-scale investigation. Number 7. Joseph Clarence Cox. In April of 2021, the Gadsden Police Department in Alabama arrested dentist Joseph Clarence Cox following an investigation into the extensive abuse he'd carried out against multiple patients and staff members at his practice. From June of 2020 to April of 2021, there was a large employee turnover at the Gadsden Dental Clinic, which Cox had started in 2017. It would emerge that it was due to the dentist abusing the workers and, as Judge George Day pointed out, treating the practice as his own personal playground. Of the 8 former employees who testified about the abuse, 2 of them noted that it went beyond unwanted touching and that Cox had forced himself on them. Some of the assaults reportedly went on during normal business hours. 3 of the dentist's former patients testified to being touched inappropriately by Cox during their dental procedures. A few years before he opened his practice in Gadsden, Cox had displayed similarly abusive behavior. In 2012, a woman who'd worked at his dental office in Fort Payne was fired after she'd refused Cox's advances, which included him making suggestive comments and smacking her on the bottom. In that particular case, Cox was arrested and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of misdemeanor harassment. He was fined $500, sentenced to probation, and his dental license was suspended for 6 months. However, following convictions on his latest crimes, Judge Day gave him consecutive sentences, noting that it was the only way in which justice would be served for each of the 11 victims. Therefore, in the spring of 2024, Cox was handed a total of 180 years behind bars, a sentence he stated an intention of appealing. Carol Griffith, District Attorney of Etowah County, described the judge's decision as a good day for justice and for the women in the community. Number 6. Kevin Emerson. In 2019, it was revealed that Englishman Kevin Emerson, who'd worked at J.P. Morgan for 33 years, had stolen a small fortune from the company during his employment. Emerson, who primarily worked at the banking giant's Bournemouth offices, was arrested shortly after his retirement. The former vice president admitted charges of theft and fraud at Bournemouth Crown Court. He explained the bulk of the missing money as an attempt to cover up an error he'd made during a transaction. Emerson claimed he'd processed a foreign exchange payment for £100 million rather than $100 million, costing the company hundreds of thousands of pounds. Due to a change in the exchange rate, fearing he would be fired, he took advantage of the position of absolute trust he held at the bank. During the years that followed, he fraudulently transferred money between 2 different accounts to mask the loss. It was also found that between 2002 and 2006, he stole at least £118,000 by writing fraudulent checks to credit card companies. Emerson was suspected to have used some of the pilfered funds to fund his online gambling addiction. Once he retired and was no longer able to hide the money, the loss was automatically detected by the bank. However, given the time elapsed before the offenses were discovered, a considerable amount of financial data had been lost, and investigators could only definitively confirm the theft of £118,000. In the winter of 2019, Emerson was sentenced to 28 months for fraud by abuse of position and a further 28 months to run concurrently for the theft. Number 5. Anita Gail Moody. On May the 11th of 2019, a fire broke out in the boardroom of the Enloe State Bank in the small town of Cooper, Texas. Numerous financial files were consumed by the blaze the day before they were due to undergo a routine review by the Texas Department of Banking. The fire was contained in the boardroom, but the entire building sustained smoke damage. Investigators later found that someone had deliberately stacked the financial files on the boardroom table and set them ablaze. As the investigation progressed, it emerged that bank president Anita Gail Moody had created over 100 fraudulent loans in the names of various people, including actual bank customers. Moody was subsequently arrested, and she admitted to causing the fire intentionally to cover her criminal activity. From 2012 to 2019, Moody stole over $11 million from the bank, which she used to fund her lifestyle as well as the business ventures of her friends and boyfriend. The fraudulent operation was damaging to the extent that the Texas Department of Banking closed Enloe State Bank in the aftermath. It was the first bank failure to be reported in the U.S. since 2017. In June of 2020, Moody pleaded guilty to federal counts of conspiracy to commit bank fraud and arson. She was sentenced to 84 months in federal prison in order to pay over $11 million in restitution. Number 4. Michelle Hollingsworth and Deborah Jones. Over a 5-year period, a head teacher at a primary school in Smethwick, Staffordshire, England, systematically siphoned money from the institution in a corrupt operation involving several accomplices. From January of 2010 to September of 2015, Michelle Hollingsworth was the ringleader for fraudulent activities that cost the Annie Leonard Primary School over £500,000. She was in what was characterized as the prime position for fraudulent activity, as she was given power by the local authority to manage school checks. Her primary accomplice was school secretary Deborah Jones, who partook in pilfering the funds, using them for personal indulgence and covering their disappearance. As revealed in a 2019 trial, the duo made over 180 trips to boutique stores, some as far away as Cheshire, presumably to avoid detection within the community. They bought a wide range of luxury products, ranging from designer clothing to antique furniture and oil paintings. Additionally, they profited from dubious dealings with tradesmen for work that was either overpriced or fully fabricated. Jones would admit in court to creating roughly £74,000 worth of phantom work, with the proceeds going to her husband's building firm. as Hollingsworth and Jones made tens of thousands in illicit funds, the repercussions were felt by the school's staff and students. To maintain a balance on the books, Hollingsworth rejected pay raises for the teachers under her authority, and staff had to buy basic materials for their pupils with their own money. Hollingsworth and Jones blamed the lack of money for the school on being shortchanged by the local authority. The head teacher was found guilty of conspiring to defraud with 5 other people and an attempt to pervert the course of justice by trying to get one of the tradesmen involved, carpenter Robert McKeown, to take sole responsibility for his role. McKeown was given a suspended sentence after agreeing to testify against the head teacher. A judge told 55-year-old Hollingsworth during sentencing, "These series of conspiracies would not have existed without you. You abused your position of power, trust and responsibility to become the linchpin for all this offending." Hollingsworth was jailed for 5 years, while her husband, who'd cashed in with false invoices and purchase orders, was given a 1-year sentence. Jones admitted creating fictitious work and conspiracy to defraud and was found guilty on 2 further charges of conspiring to defraud with tradesmen. She was sentenced to 4 years and 3 months. The workers who'd conspired with the duo and had profited from the racket were all given suspended sentences. Number 3. Russian Ministry of Defense. In the spring of 2024, the Russian government launched what international media described as a purge of its Ministry of Defense ranks. The Federal Security Service was reportedly tasked by President Vladimir Putin to carry out a crackdown on corruption within the ministry. Corruption in the Russian military was generally regarded as widespread and widely tolerated by international media. The recent investigation was interpreted as an effort to cut down on dubious dealings that would potentially cost the state valuable funds which were otherwise needed elsewhere, most notably in the ongoing war in the Ukraine. Captain John Foreman, the UK's former defense attaché in Moscow, suggested that Putin's patience finally snapped. Other political commentators highlighted it as a notable example of the president's growing strength and grip on the country in light of his recent re-election and as a deterrent to would-be political adversaries. A dozen high-ranking officials lost their positions and 7 of them were arrested in rapid succession. Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov was arrested for taking bribes on a particularly large scale on April the 23rd of 2024. In mid-May, Putin dismissed and replaced Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, Russia's longest-serving minister. He'd overseen the invasion of Ukraine and faced widespread criticism for the subsequent military setbacks, as well as for failing to eradicate corruption within the military. Shoigu was believed to be part of Putin's inner circle, as he reportedly went on regular hunting and fishing trips with him in Siberia. He was one of the most powerful men in Russia, as similar to the president, he had direct access to the country's nuclear weapons. Captain Freeman regarded Shoigu as a long-standing buffer between corruption in the Ministry of Defense and the FSB's efforts to bring it to justice. With him removed, the security service began investigating other officials, and as Freeman stated, once the FSB has their teeth in you, who knows how far they will go. Among the arrested was Lieutenant General Head of the Main Personnel Directorate of the Russian Ministry of Defense, Yuri Kuznetsov. He was taken into custody just 2 days after Shoigu had been replaced. Ivan Popov, Major General, former commander of the 58th Army, was taken into custody and faced up to 10 years in prison for allegedly embezzling over $1 million. Lieutenant General Vadim Shamarin, Deputy Chief of the General Staff, was arrested for accepting bribes. Within hours of his arrest on May the 23rd, Vladimir Verteletsky, a senior procurement officer in Russia's Defense Ministry, was also detained. He was accused of taking a bribe in relation to work that was not carried out under a government contract in 2022, costing the state over $770,000. Today's topic was requested by Fred Williams 420 and Conciliere 1. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Fred Way. 50-year-old Fred Way, a superintendent at the Baylor Women's Correctional Institute in Newcastle, Delaware, was arrested in July of 2015 after it was discovered that he'd used his position to have relations with a 27-year-old inmate. Way was reported to have been intimate with the unnamed woman on multiple occasions during a 6-month period. He went against the detainment facility's policy by shutting the door to his office to be alone with her and engage in various intimate acts. The woman notified prison officials, and Baylor warden Wendy Capel conducted an internal investigation and notified state police. The illicit relationship had reportedly begun with kissing and groping. The inmate, who was serving an extended sentence, noted that she hadn't received that type of attention in a long time, so she liked it. On the morning of June the 12th, she performed an oral act on Way. Surveillance video showed her disappearing out of camera view in the office for 9 minutes. 2 days later, on Sunday, she returned to Clean Way's office and reported that they had intercourse really quick. The time that she was out of sight from surveillance cameras was estimated at 3 minutes. Way held the third highest rank at Baylor, just below deputy warden and warden. He was fired from his position in the wake of his arrest. The day before his scheduled trial in January of 2016, Way struck a deal and pleaded guilty to 4 counts of official misconduct. In March, he was sentenced to a year of probation and to spend 25 weekends from 6 p.m. Friday to 6 p.m. Sunday at the Plummer Community Correction Center. A judge, however, agreed to modify the sentence in the aftermath and allow the disgraced prison official to spend more time in home confinement. The decision was made at the behest of Way's attorney, who claimed the disgraced prison boss was threatened during his first weekend in detainment. One inmate reportedly called him a dead man walking, and another said, "You are the deputy warden or something. You know you're gonna die in here." Number 1. Luis Rubiales. As he returned to Madrid from the Dominican Republic on April the 3rd of 2024, the former president of the Royal Spanish Football Federation, or RFEF, was arrested by law enforcement as part of Operation Brody. The investigation targeted the organization's corrupt dealings under the leadership of Luis Rubiales, primarily regarding the relocation of the Spanish Super Cup to Saudi Arabia in a deal worth over $42 million. By that point, however, Rubiales had already resigned from his official positions due to a separate scandal and criminal case. It was dubbed Kissgate in the media, and it arguably dwarfed the findings of Operation Brody, surpassing them in scope by prompting global debates about the treatment of women in sports. While still acting in an official capacity, Rubiales displayed what a FIFA disciplinary committee described as inexcusable and unacceptable behavior when he attended the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. On August the 20th of 2023, Spain faced England in the final and won the match. The most notable and widely covered instance of Rubiales' power-crazy outbursts was him forcibly kissing Jenny Hermoso, the national team's all-time top scorer, during the medal presentation. After hugging Hermoso tightly, Rubiales grabbed her head with both hands and kissed her on the lips. When addressing the incident in a social media live stream from the locker room, the player was recorded saying, "I didn't like it," before adding, "But what am I supposed to do?" When Rubiales entered the locker room in the aftermath, he reportedly threw his arm around Hermoso and joked about marrying her in Ibiza. Swift and strong international reactions followed the incident, with the kiss described as Rubiales taking advantage of his position of power in Spanish football to behave in a despicable manner. His actions sparked outrage, particularly due to the fact that respect for women in sports was considered to be harder to obtain in the context of it being a male-dominated environment. Further instances of Rubiales being out of control at the World Cup final were identified in the period that followed. They involved him grabbing his crotch shortly after the final whistle while standing in the authorities' box near Queen Letizia of Spain and her teenage daughter, Infanta Sofia. After Spain won, Rubiales carried player Athenia del Castillo over his shoulder on the pitch and kissed player Olga Carmona on the cheek. His unwanted touching also extended to players from the English team, as he reportedly forcefully kissed Lucy Bronze and stroked the face of Laura Coombs. Kissing Hermoso, which became the fulcrum of the soccer president's fall from grace, was addressed by Rubiales. However, his statements on social media, during interviews and at disciplinary hearings only fanned the flame of public fury. He initially brazenly denied any wrongdoing, calling the incident an unimportant gesture of affection, while describing his critics as idiots and losers. As he entered damage control, he and other RFEF officials pressured Hermoso to appear in his apology video and show support for him, which she refused. In a speech at an RFEF assembly, Rubiales described the kiss as a peck, and also saying it was euphoric. The condemning reactions that followed displayed unprecedented unity in Spanish society as politicians from across the spectrum condemned Rubiales, while there was an outpouring of support towards women's soccer from the men in the same sport. In spite of recurrent protests and repeated calls for his resignation, including from Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, Rubiales refused to give up his position. FIFA promptly banned the president from various soccer-related activities. On September the 6th, Hermoso filed a criminal complaint against Rubiales. A few days later, he finally resigned from his positions as RFEF president and UEFA vice president. As of the latest updates on his ongoing cases, Rubiales denied any wrongdoing in the corruption scandal, stating, "The money in my bank account is the result of my work and my savings." For forcibly kissing Hermoso, he was charged with assault and coercion, with prosecutors seeking a 2.5-year sentence. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have the power to change your appearance or to travel instantly anywhere in the world? Let us know in the comments section below.